11 o'clock on your Monday morning. Welcome in. It is the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler Head, Wes Mitchell, and Chris Clark along with you here in the Herndon Chevrolet Studios. And oh boy, was it a busy weekend on the Gamecock front. Obviously had the basketball teams in action, the baseball team picking up 2 wins against Belmont, winning the series there over the weekend. But perhaps the biggest news that everybody's wanted to talk about is what's happening with the Gamecock coaching staff, because once again, Coach Beamer is going to have to go back to the well looking for another assistant, this time at the wide receiver coaching spot, as James Coley, who had only been introduced a month ago, has now opted to take the same position at Georgia.
Yeah, James Coley, we hardly knew you. This one was interesting. It seemed like that maybe Georgia was going to go a different direction as far as their target for that job. And then the guy that it was rumored they were going to hire to coach receivers, they turned around and hired to coach running backs, which...
well, 2 for 1 there.
Yeah, I thought was kind of interesting. But, yeah, from a South Carolina perspective, certainly not what you wanted to spend your weekend doing if you're Shane Beamer, is finding out you're losing a guy who, let me point out, he was always going to be able to catch on somewhere, but sure, he was in a situation where his job security was up in the air because of A&M letting go of basically pretty much their entire staff. And you brought him back to the SEC, got him a nice job, I believe a 3-year contract. Is that right, Chris?
Who, Coley here?
Yes.
2.
Yeah, it's a 2-year deal.
2-year deal.
Yeah.
Point being, pretty good situation. And this is a guy you've been on staff with before, and he up and leaves before he ever coaches a game. So I don't normally get too caught up in this stuff. Like, it is just business at the end of the day when it comes to coaching decisions. But I do think, regardless of your reasons, when you leave a place without ever coaching a single season, like literally not a single football game, when you're working under a guy who, is your friend, I don't think it's a great look.
I mean, this one has to sting for Shane Beamer, and I think especially because of the reasons that you just laid out, they do have a history together. These guys coached together at Georgia, 2016 and 2017. Coley stayed on staff a couple more seasons. Beamer moved on to Oklahoma, but they knew each other. This is a guy that you felt like was kind of a coup in the offseason, because he was available, but he had other offers. We know, Beamer mentioned one ACC school, one SEC school. I know Miami was the ACC school. I don't know about the SEC. So you're able to get this guy in. And you felt like the reality is if Georgia didn't have an opening, if Brian McClendon was still the receivers coach there, James Coley would still be here right now, most likely.
Sure.
But that's the way it happened. And it's kind of it's a tough pill to swallow, I think, that this happened, not only because of the impact on your team. Coley, it's not like they were going through spring practice, right? But he's starting to get entrenched with the players. You saw some of the players reacting on social media, just kind of like a wow or that type of emotion. Coley was starting to get entrenched in recruiting, which is an area you expected him to help a lot. And then if you're Shane Beamer, quite frankly, not that I'm not trying to put words in his mouth, but just kind of how I would look at it is, man, like, this is a guy that you knew, and he's going to another SEC East school to take basically the same job, place that demoted him from OC, and then he left for A&M after that. It's just kind of it's a tough pill to swallow. In some ways, it reminded me a little bit of when Beamer retained Mike Bobo. Now, Bobo did end up, he coached here under Will Muschamp. He retained Bobo, lets Bobo handpick his O-line coach, Will Friend, and then they bounce out, both of them, to Auburn. Friend almost immediately.
Right.
Just, tough situation.
So let's look at this from the perspective of what South Carolina is losing, because when we go back to Coley being hired a little over a month ago, we talked about the fact that here's a guy, I believe he's 50 years old, been around the game of college football for a long time. Obviously, he's been in a lot of high-level programs, Miami, Florida State, Georgia, has been a play caller before, has coached position groups before. He's kind of seen and done it all, and also has a prowess in recruiting, particularly in that South Florida area around Miami where 4- and 5-star talent seems to grow on trees. And that was something that you were very excited to have within this South Carolina program that now is going out the door.
Yeah, I mean, I think all those things are still true. It's just he's taken his talents to Athens, and I think it's a bit of a slap in the face, honestly. And I see some people who want to maybe like blame Shane Beamer for it. I don't really have that take at all. It's you can't get upset for a coach hiring guys who maybe don't have a big name and are sort of more younger up-and-comers, and you can't get mad and say, why'd you hire that guy? He doesn't have any SEC experience, and then simultaneously get upset when you do go out and get a big name and get the SEC guy, and then, he up and leaves. Like, I don't really know if there's anything South Carolina could have done to fix this. You're not going to turn around and say, I really don't think you turn around and beg him. If he's like, hey, guys, I'm thinking about leaving, you're not going to be like, well, hey, we're going to give you $250,000 more dollars. We all just agreed on what you're going to make a month ago.
Yeah.
So you either want to be here and you stay, or you don't want to be here and you go to Athens. Like, there's not really, at that point, it's like if you already got engaged, you're not supposed to have to beg, your wife to stick around. So I think, if I'm South Carolina, I don't know what you do differently in this situation. Like, you went out, you got a big name guy, you did beat out some other schools. What could you have done differently? Like, you can sit there and say, well, hey, you should have hire a guy that didn't have a big name in the sport, but then some people would be complaining about that as well.
Well, and we don't know the exact details of his new position at Georgia, but I imagine they probably offered him more money. He does have the $450,000 buyout as part of his contract to South Carolina. I imagine Georgia's going to take care of that for him, where that won't be a problem. But I imagine he got offered more money. This is, again, a program that he was at for several years, was the OC, didn't go that great, but also, was a position coach there as well when Shane Beamer was there. So there's familiarity there, obviously the relationship that he has with Kirby Smart, and it's a program that right now is sitting in a better position than South Carolina. So there's a lot of reasons for why he would eventually end up going, and these are things that unfortunately just kind of happen in the world of college football. And a lot of people brought this up earlier when I was asking them kind of how they feel about it, and some people said they felt betrayed and all this kind of stuff, but at the same time others were saying, well, we kind of did the same thing to Georgia State by literally getting their head coach a week and a half, 2 weeks ago, and bringing him in as a position coach here. So unfortunately, sometimes you're the windshield and sometimes you're the bug.
Yeah, there is that to an extent. I mean, but Sean Elliott was also at Georgia State for a number of years. So it's not like Sean Elliott was there for 3 weeks and then was like, sorry, guys, I'm going back to Rosewood.
This one isn't going to show up on James Coley's Wikipedia, like, coaching history.
It's already been updated. Wikipedia has.
They're fast.
Does it have South Carolina on there?
So it's not listed on, the little sidebar, the table.
Yep.
It doesn't list them there because now it just says Georgia wide receivers.
There'll be a little blip sentence.
Yeah,
right?
They got the little heading that says South Carolina. Hey, he was hired this date. However, a month later, boom, he goes to Georgia. So that Wikipedia official now.
Do you think he gets a raise from Georgia?
I was looking at his South Carolina contract. So the first year here in Columbia, I think he was. Hesitate to use the word only. He was only going to get paid $650,000. My assumption that I didn't follow up on is that he's still getting some A&M money.
Yeah,
you see that. So that happened with Torian Gray.
Yeah.
When he got to South Carolina, he was still getting paid by Florida. And then I think year two, it jumped to $850. So my guess is they're going to take care of all or a good portion of the buyout, like you said, and then he'll probably get more money. But look, beyond that, I mean, I think you go back to the other things, the state of Georgia's program. I mean, anybody, you can be the most hardcore Gamecock fan in the world. Georgia's program is Georgia. He's worked for Kirby Smart before. He's had a lot of success there. His family is more familiar with Athens than they are Columbia, just to be quite frank. So you understand. Now, some people, some coaches would consider all those factors and still say, well, you know what, man, I just took this job. Like, I'm staying. And that's the difference. And that's why I think for Beamer, in addition to this being a big hassle to lose a coach in this scenario, is probably looking at this thing going, man, like, come on, like kind of that loyalty factor type of deal.
To me, is it not completely different? Does it not feel completely different if he does this even after one season? Like he has his one season at South Carolina.
Yeah, totally different.
And now he would still get some backlash from some fans, but I think at that point you just say, God, it's a business. Georgia called. I'm familiar. I know the coaches there. Like you said, my family is more familiar with Athens. I gave my 1 year, and I'm out of here. Not that the contract was for 1 year, but I think it's just much more accepted that your job in football, and that's accepted with the rosters at this point as well. It's like a year-to-year thing. I think the real part where it maybe gets a little bit personal is just that he did just get to South Carolina, and I'm sure, is telling the receivers on campus what is expected of them, about how they've got to put their personal goals aside for the team, and whatever coaches say when they first get there about all their grand plans for a position group. And we all know to an extent that ultimately it's just like, you could probably go back, whatever Coley said in his opening press conference. I'm sure he was super excited to be here, and he probably said all the things that a coach says. And just like we talked about with Sean Elliott, it's a little bit different when Sean Elliott, Columbia native, Camden native, Columbia resident, when he says those things, they probably mean a little bit more. And you just kind of accept that you're going to get some platitudes from other coaches. But you you at least expect them to give you one season, I think, if you're a fan. So that's why fans are rightfully so ticked off.
And I think there's always going to be a curiosity with wondering what could have been if he stayed on as your wide receivers coach, especially if you get to the fall and maybe some of the guys aren't as developed as you want to be. Maybe they're struggling out of the gate or whatever it may be, and you say, okay, well, if Coley was here, how different would this be? And again, we're never going to have answers to those questions, but it's something that people are going to be left to wonder, especially if, Georgia's wide receiver room is taking off next season and South Carolina's is struggling. So it's unfortunately just kind of one of those weird situations. It's not foreign. Again, you talked about the Bobo Will Friends situation a couple years ago. It's not a foreign thing, even here at South Carolina, but something that you unfortunately have to deal with sometimes.
Yeah, true. And, the other side of that is you never know what's going to happen. They could say, a lot of times it seems like when something like this happens, people go in the opposite direction, and you may say, all right, let's go get a guy that's just going to knock down a wall to be at South Carolina. Let's go get a young up-and-comer, somebody that wants to be here, somebody that would do anything to have this job and actually maybe respects the opportunity you're being given and doesn't think you have to be at a blue blood to win. I think if you go out and get a guy like that, maybe we're sitting here a year from now and being like, hey, that all worked out as well as it possibly. I mean, you look at South Carolina, for some of our old heads, they go out under Steve Spurrier. They hire Van Gorder to be their defensive coordinator, and he leaves. I mean, do you remember how quickly that was, Chris? I mean, it was pretty quickly.
It was like Coley-esque. It was faster. I think it was faster even, maybe, possibly. It's around the same time.
Everybody freaks out, rightfully so. And then they bring in some guy named Ellis Johnson who ends up being one of the best defensive coordinators in school history.
Way better hire.
Yes. So
sometimes it
just works out.
Brent Venables was not Dabo Swinney's first choice at Clemson.
Yeah, and we're not saying that to explain it away. Yeah. It is it's not ideal. This is not what ideal. You wanted to happen, but let's see what the future tells us.
So we'll look at where South Carolina can go from here coming up as the Coley conversation continues. It is the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs here on The Game.
If you need a lunch recommendation, let me recommend the fine folks at Firehouse Subs, founded by firemen. Awesome charity work, awesome food by our guy Larry Chandler. Shout out to him. Owner and operator of all 14 Midlands Firehouse Subs locations. And if you're getting hungry here at 11:15 a.m. on the game, just like I am, you can avoid the wait and you can order online by using Firehouse Subs Rapid Rescue to Go. FirehouseSubs.com. You can go there to order. You can log in, earn yourself some rewards on future purchases, and have your sub waiting on you when you get to this store. Just pick up your drink and your chips, and you're good to go. You can also download the Firehouse Subs app from the Google Play or the Apple App Store. Do the same thing right there. Check out the new Chicken Parmesan Meatball Sub for a limited time only. If you haven't had it yet, make sure you get it before it goes away. If you've already had it and you want to give it another whirl, make sure you check it out before it's gone. FirehouseSubs.com or the Firehouse Subs app.
Hello, everybody. First of all, I just want to give my gratitude to Coach Beamer, Coach Tanner, and Chance Miller for giving me this opportunity to coach at this great university. You know, I've been on the sideline and been on the other end of a great atmosphere, electric fan base that's passionate about what they do. And it's you know, you sit there and you say, wow, this is a great place. And for me, you know, it's an honor to be a part of Coach Beamer's staff, you know, because of the man he is, because of the type of coach he is. You know, for me, it's awesome. And for my family, it's an honor just to be a part of this great university. So.
Well, that's awkward. Welcome back in. Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler Ed, Wes Mitchell, Chris Clark along with you. That was James Coley a little over a month ago being formally introduced as South Carolina's wide receivers coach at that point in time. Obviously now he has left to go take the same job at Georgia. And again, we're always going to kind of wonder what could have been with him. But now you turn your attention to where does Shane Beamer go from here and who does he bring in to fill that void?
Yeah, we'll see where that goes. And he will, at the positive side of this is that he's going to owe the University of South Carolina a big old check. So they can turn around and spend that money to hire the next guy, right?
Yeah.
I mean, the University of Georgia is going to pay South Carolina a big check. I don't think that one's coming out of Coley's pocketbook.
Well, yeah, he'll pay it. He'll have to pay it. They'll pay it on his behalf,
Yes.
I guess is what you would say.
Yeah,
but still, you're getting the money regardless, is my point.
You're making a little money. You know, maybe not much consolation there, get all things considered. And, you know, tough deal because I do think, I mean, one of the things I know Wes and I are hearing before this all happened was that, you know, I think Coley was probably starting to make some headway with some receiver prospects, right? So I think just kind of like when you lose a recruit, you know, no matter when this happened, whether it's a coach, whether it's a recruit, it's about, at the end of the day, who is on your staff and who's on your team, you know? So when you lose a recruit, a lot of times the reaction is, God, lost that guy. That sucks. But at the end of the day, who's in your class? Did you sign guys that can make a difference? And, you know, on the surface, I mean, this thing stings for a lot of reasons. How it happened is certainly one, because there's kind of a personal, like, that's kind of a shot, you know, element. But just from a practical standpoint, I mean, James Coley, heck of a recruiter. Like, this guy was probably going to do some good things from a recruiting standpoint. And that is why Shane Beamer brought him in. You know, people have asked us, well, who was number two? Like, who was Beamer's backup? There wasn't really, I mean, this was a deal where Beamer even admitted this publicly. Once Jimbo Fisher got fired at Texas A&M, Shane Beamer looked at that staff and said, ooh, James Coley is probably going to be available. I'm going to go get him and add him to my staff. And I think he always had in his mind probably receiver, because that's an area that Shane Beamer identified this offseason as we need to get better at receiver, especially in the recruiting department, right? And so you bring him in to help fix that problem. Now, in some ways, you're kind of back at square one. But again, to bring this all back to the original point, and Wes, you said this last segment, who do you get? Mm-hmm. That's the key here. James Coley's not the only good recruiter in the country. He's not the only good receivers coach. Can you get somebody comparable, better, along the same lines? That's the key.
Yeah, and I don't think you're going to go get somebody better resume-wise right now.
No,
like if you just compared them A to A, probably not going to get someone better from that standpoint. But could you get somebody that ends up being better? Absolutely, and that's what you seek to do if you're Shane Beamer, if you're South Carolina, if you're Chance Miller, if you're everybody involved over there. And so I think every coach has that sort of proverbial list in their desk, or at least in their head, that they were going to go to. But like Chris said, this was not a situation where you necessarily had a receivers coach opening. It's not like step left. I mean, I think that's maybe why this burns a little bit more for fans as well, is that you know, Justin Stepp, well-liked, local guy among the fan base. And because Coley was out there, Beamer said, this is someone who has had enough success, especially the recruiting aspect, I think, going out and landing players. And receiver is every position is, but certainly wide receiver is a go-get talent position. And you said, man, that's a guy who could really help us go get talent, I'm sure is what Shane Beamer was saying. And so you make this move, and you slide Stepp to tight ends. Stepp does not want to coach tight ends, so Stepp takes the Illinois job to coach wide receivers. And then a month later, Coley up and leaves to go to a division rival, even though I guess the divisions don't exist anymore, but y'all know what I mean. And so I think that's another reason it burns a little bit more, is just because of all the elements that played out here that led to this happening.
As far as replacing Coley now, I mean, we're almost into March now. Typically, you don't have this much movement with your assistants, and South Carolina's had a lot of movement over the past month when it comes to their assistants. How difficult does it become now that we're so late in the process? Literally, spring practice is only a couple weeks away from starting when it comes to filling the role. Now, you could go the route of what Georgia just did and poaching somebody else from another coaching staff that's already in position, or is it something you just got to go out there and find somebody else that is available at this point in time?
Yeah, no, I think you definitely are going to be in a position where you could potentially do to somebody else what just happened to you. And there will be interest in this job. Like, it's an SEC receiver's job. You can go out, you can get somebody that has been really good. I think the question will be, what direction do you go? And from what we've seen and what we've specifically been told with Shane Beamer, it's not necessarily usually a situation where he says, hey, I want to go young up-and-comer this time, or I want to go older veteran this time, or I want to go somewhere in between. It's more, who do I believe the best available coaches are at this given point? And whether it's young up-and-comer that brings some added energy, or whether it's just a veteran who brings all these other things to the table like a Sean Elliott would, that kind of is just one factor of it. That's not the main driving factor. I would tend to think, because of that calendar aspect, it probably is going to, I don't want to say have to be, but it almost is going to have to be one of those people that I was talking about in general earlier that would basically walk down I-77 to get the job. Just because anybody that's maybe not in that category, they may be sitting there saying, wow, we're starting spring practice in 10 days. I don't want to do this to my current team. And almost... that may be the guy you need, but in a big picture standpoint, do you want the guy who would leave his current situation with a week?
Because Shane Beamer has now, he's seen part 2 of this movie, like the Will Friend Mike Boat. He's seen the other side of that now, and that same guy that would leave to come to South Carolina,
he might do the same to you.
He might do the same thing to go to Georgia or wherever else. And you don't want that. So, but, there's also a lot of guys. You can't just hire a guy who wants to be here either, or recruit guys that just want to be here, because that's a way to, have a not very good football team as well. So you have to have that mix of who can get the job done.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll see what Beamer ultimately ends up doing. Again, not a position you thought you were going to be here in late February. We'll jump into some of the other things that happened around Gamecock athletics over the weekend. Basketball teams in action, also baseball team too. Real quick, speaking of baseball, I have a pair of tickets for tomorrow afternoon's game, taking on Gardner-Webb, 4 o'clock out at Founders Park. Caller number 4 right now, 803-404-6100. Win yourself that pair of tickets to see the Gamecocks take on the Bulldogs of Gardner-Webb. We'll be back with more from the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs here on the game.
If you want to take your man cave, your living room, your kitchen, bathroom, patio, any room to the next level at your home, hit up our guys at Integrated Media. Michael, Nathan, their team, they've been out to West Mitchell's home. They've been out to my home. They can come out to your home or business as well. They specialize in smart home installation services right here in the Midlands. They can help you do everything as simple as mounting a television and hiding all the ugly wires so that you have a great presentation and that everything works properly in your home, they can do that, and they can also do everything all the way up to a smart home system. Smart homes, that's where you can control your lights, your thermostat, your sound systems, your TVs, security cameras, and alarm systems from the touch of a button on your smartphone. Go check out their website, integratedmediainc.com, or check them out on Facebook, Integrated Media Columbia, Facebook and Instagram. You can get some examples of their past work and some inspiration. 803-948-8327.
Swings at this one and hits it well the opposite field to right. This one's got some carry back at the wall. The right fielder will watch it sail out. Kennedy Jones in the starting lineup and makes his presence known immediately with an opposite field blast to tie this game at 1 here in the first inning.
Welcome back in. Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler Ed, Wes Mitchell, Chris Clark with you on this Monday. That was Derek Scott yesterday on the call as things got started off on the right foot for the Gamecocks. Kennedy Jones with that home run to open things up in the inevitable 12-1 victory for the Gamecocks over Belmont. Real quick, want to remind you about the Palmetto Citizens Federal Credit Union Grand Slam giveaway going on all season long. $25 gets added to the pot each and every game until a Gamecock hitter does hit a Grand Slam. Then it resets to 0 and we'll build back up again. So go online to 1075thegame.com and register for your chance to win, because when one inevitably does, because they're tearing the cover off the ball right now, Grand Slam's going to happen eventually. You want to make sure you can be that winner of the Palmetto Citizens Federal Credit Union Grand Slam giveaway. Gamecocks up for their first loss of the season on Saturday, 11-2 to Belmont. Things just one of those days where things just weren't going your way, and Belmont was kind of clicking on all cylinders. But at the end of the weekend, you won the series, got another run rule game yesterday, 12-1, and sitting in good position. Only 3 undefeated teams left in the SEC. All of them suffered at least one loss to a mid-major at this point in time. But feel pretty good coming away from it, not only with your offense but from your pitching staff as well.
Yeah, I thought obviously you don't want to have a blowout loss in the middle of it, but overall for South Carolina right now, 7-1, and I think there are encouraging signs about this team. We don't have all the answers yet, of course, but you look at just the guys that aren't Cole Messina. Obviously, Cole had a big weekend too, but the guys that aren't named Messina or Petrie, just lots of guys stepping up. Dylan Brewer has had a fantastic start to the year. Tal LeCroy has been an on-base machine. Eli Jones has kind of been what you thought he would be as a pitcher. And, there's a lot of different guys we can talk about and sort of directions we can go with this. But Kennedy Jones is someone that you looked at when they landed him out of the transfer portal. And you said, man, this is a big pickup for South Carolina. And just didn't, I guess, have the preseason they wanted out of him. And you have high competition in the outfield for this team. So it makes sense. If you're not performing, even if you are supremely talented, you may not start the year. And that was the case with Kennedy Jones, but he is settling in. Mark Kingston talked about he is a 400 lifetime hitter against lefties. And so that was part of the reason they went that direction. Maybe, I think Kennedy Jones eventually may be one of those guys that's going to be too good to keep out of the lineup. But you say that, and then you kind of look, you've got to take somebody out of the lineup, obviously.
Well, that's the thing, is he came in battling for that left field spot. Blake Jackson obviously ended up getting it. He just done a great job in that leadoff spot. And again, you got Petrie out there in center field, so it's hard to kind of slide him in anywhere, right field. And so it's kind of hard to slide him in anywhere at this point in time. But again, if he's just playing as well as he has in these few little bits that we've been able to see him so far this season, it is going to be really hard to keep him off the field. But Kingston talked about this after yesterday's game. It's good to have 11, 12 guys that should be out there on the field, as opposed to only having 7 or 8 and having to fill in the gaps, with what you can elsewhere. So this team's sitting in a pretty good position right now from an offensive standpoint. And again, as you mentioned, Eli Jones had a good outing on Friday night. You had Roman Kimball and Matthew Becker. They both had good showings yesterday in their 7 innings of work. And, pitching from a full standpoint of SQ, Veach and Williamson wasn't that great on Saturday. But again, hopefully that's one of those one-game anomalies. Things get back on track this weekend against Clemson.
And I think if you are the staff, you're going to be looking at what other potential combinations do we have at our disposal. It was mentioned that Petrie has taken ground balls at first base. So now ultimately, Casas is hitting .211 right now. He had a really nice night. I guess that was probably Friday, and started to tend to look like he was getting back to his old self. Ultimately, Casas, I think, is going to be in this lineup. But that when you have a team with this much competition, that does open the door to potentially sliding Petrie to first base, and that opens up the lineup to potentially, obviously, add an additional outfielder, and that, in this case, you would think would be Kennedy Jones going out there with Dylan Brewer and Blake Jackson. So you're going to have some options as this thing rolls along. You're going to have some options at DH. Tyler Causey has been, I would say, borderline fantastic so far in his return to baseball, but Ryan Bakes, I go back, I always listen when coaches tell us something like, man, the ball just sounds different when that guy hits, or, man, that guy just grabbed my attention. And when we had Stuart Lake on a couple of weeks ago, he said that about Ryan Bakes, who is a catcher by trade, but obviously we know Messina is going to be catching most of the games this year. So are there at-bats for Ryan Bakes to be found? I think you look at all the guys on this stat card right now, and it's not just 8 or 9 guys that are going to be on the field. There's probably a 10th, 11th, maybe a 12th guy who could play and help this team quite a bit. I think there are still some questions. You want to get Will Tippett going, obviously, and on Saturday, like you said, Tyler, the pitching was not great, but one of the most encouraging things for me that we have seen so far this year, Matthew Becker on the mound. I think we all, when we heard about the injury, we all kind of tensed up a little bit. When you hear that with pitchers, they can say, oh, it's a week, it's 2 weeks. But everybody who follows baseball knows a week can become a month can become 2 months. So for him not only be pitching, but to be pitching as well as he is, that is a great sign for South Carolina.
And we knew he was going to factor into the weekend rotation, at some point. He seems to be building back his strength. And Kingston mentioned this yesterday for both him and Roman Kimball. They should be back in about the 80-pitch range for this upcoming weekend against Clemson, which is pretty much as close to a full go, as you can get there. So we'll see kind of how they develop as the week goes along and see if maybe Becker can factor into that starting role on Saturday as well.
Yeah, I agree, Wes. Becker, and he had really good stuff, in his outing this weekend. His off-speed stuff looked, unhittable. Kimball was a guy coming into the year that for me was like an X factor, wild card, however you wanted to put it, because he's really good. You also know that he was coming off a very long layoff from baseball after Tommy John surgery, and so how would he look? How would he reintegrate? He threw game 1, lower pitch count. What did he throw this weekend? 60-something pitches, I think.
65.
Originally it was, hey, we'll probably give him 50. He went a little above that and looked totally fine, so now you continue to work him up. And, aside from that first inning, he had really good stuff. He's a guy that's going to kind of be an alpha for you. I mean, you see his demeanor. He, I think maybe his last strikeout or one of his last strikeouts, he reminded the batter that he was now out of strikes and needed to return to the dugout kindly. That's the kind of intensity he's going to bring, along with, really good stuff. Veach has been Veach.
Sure.
He's been great. And the bats, I mean, that's the thing. Like, I thought Cassis swung the bat very well this weekend. The wind got them a couple times, multiple batters. Messina tore the cover off the ball, in game 3. And he's been a little slow going to start. So does he get things ramped up?
Well, and Kingston said this yesterday. He would have had 2 more home runs on Saturday if the wind hadn't been blowing in, because he had some pretty deep flyouts to center field there.
Yeah, Becker, by the way, right now, 10 strikeouts so far with just 3 walks. Leads the team in strikeouts. That's in just 5 innings of work. So I'll be curious. Ultimately, you do potentially look at, I think, Becker and Kimball both starting in a weekend. It'll be interesting to see how long they wait before potentially doing that. They were talking about it on the radio broadcast that extending these guys out a little bit more this weekend was probably a little bit looking ahead to next weekend when you're probably going to need them both. But also there's a case to be made for sort of just piggybacking Kimball and Becker off of each other on Sunday and knowing that both of them can cover 3, 4, even potentially 5 innings once they get stretched out, and just kind of knowing you can cover a lot of innings that way. So I think there are some decisions to be made about how to approach this pitching staff moving forward. But it's a far better situation, at least through a handful of games, than maybe it appeared to be on paper.
Right, and the weekend series against Clemson coming up this weekend. First game at Founders Park coming up on Friday, but you got to get through the midweek first, that one being Gardner-Webb coming up tomorrow afternoon at 4 o'clock. I have one more pair of tickets to give away for that game. Caller number 5 right now, 803-404-6100. Captain Dave eagerly waiting to take your call for caller number 5 to win that pair of tickets. We'll come back, wrap up today's edition of the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour, presented by Firehouse Subs. Men's basketball getting a very important win on Saturday against Oxford. That's next here on The Game.
All right, guys, continue to tell you about one of our newest sponsors, our friends at Classic Roofing, offering residential and commercial roofing services, not just here in Columbia, South Carolina, but in the surrounding areas, even expanding out to Florence as well. Give our friends Joe Reeder and Max Sawyer a call. They're both longtime residents here at the Palmetto State. They got families who live here. They're committed to giving you the best service you can possibly get when it comes to your roof. Call them today, 803-590-7870. Head on over to classicroofingsc.com. You're going to find information about their background, information about their services, and a link where you can set up a free estimate. They want to come out to your home, tell you a little bit more about your roof and what your roof may need or sometimes not need. Call them right now, 803-590-7870, or head on over to classicroofingsc.com. Again, that's residential and commercial roofing services throughout Columbia, South Carolina, and the surrounding areas.
Trying to run in his methodical offense. Burning clock at every possession. Ugasuk drives, throws it high off the glass. No. Josh Gray tips it. No. Ball loose. Murray Boyles has it, and he'll run to the rim and flush it.
Welcome back in. Gamecock Central Takeover Hour, presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler Head, Wes Mitchell, Chris Clark, along with you for a few more minutes. Derek Scott on the call on Saturday. Boy, he was busy this weekend going to Oxford and coming back for the wrap-up of the baseball series. But that was the call on Saturday. South Carolina men picking up the 72-59 win over Ole Miss on the road, getting themselves back on track after their two-game skid against Auburn and LSU. We talked about this a lot last week, how important these final 5 games were and what exactly South Carolina needed to do. Terry and I talked about winning at least 2 of those games, feel like you're in pretty good position. You go out there, you beat a team that had played pretty close at Colonial Life Arena only a couple weeks back. You handled them by 13 points on the road, get yourself back on track, and obviously are still technically in the running for the SEC regular season crown here with just a couple more games left.
Man, what a big bounce-back answer type win for those guys. They just keep proving – yeah, the LSU game was a letdown, but even that game, it wasn't like they came out and let the Auburn loss beat them twice. Like, they were in a position to win that game and just did not execute down the stretch. So you wondered again, hey, 0-2 last week. You start looking ahead at that schedule, and you're like, man, every team they play moving forward is either in the tournament or on the bubble to make the tournament. And I know you guys. Like, I know this South Carolina fan base. I was sitting there looking at it, too. I'm like, is this the skid that everybody has probably prayed will not happen this year? And the team just responded, man, and I thought played very, very well. Road SEC wins are just not easy to come by, especially against teams that are pretty good, which I think Ole Miss is a pretty good team. And I wonder now, I mean, South Carolina at 22-5, are they a lock for this thing? Or are they in? Or do you – I mean, I think one more win – not that they just want to win one more out of the 4 and then the tournament, but just by I'm just talking about bracketology right now. Are they in, period, at this point? I know if the season ended right now, they're in. I'm saying, have they locked in their spot in the tournament? I think they're very close, if not.
I think if you win on the road in College Station on Wednesday, I think at that point in time you're locked in, yeah. I mean, they're right on the verge of being locked in, but yeah, yes. I think you'd feel more comfortable if you had another win on Wednesday night. Yeah, you would have 11 conference wins. They're guaranteed to be over 500 this year. Yeah, I mean, if you lose out, worst case scenario, let's say you lost out, you beat A&M on the road, which is obviously very doable, and then even if you lost your final 3, and then you go, which 2 of those are against ranked teams, and you go one and done in the tournament, you're 23-8 at that point. I mean, that would be... And all those final losses would be against teams that are way up there in the net. And I think Florida dropped... Didn't they drop into Quad 2, I think, this weekend? But still, that's a... Yeah, you got quality teams left on the schedule with, take A&M, not really, but... Yeah, but you got to go there. So but you got to go there. Like, I'm just saying for like... Well, and A&M, they've got good wins this year.
They're on the bubble, right?
Yeah, they are in the...
They're like the outside of the bubble.
So in last week's bracketology, they were in the last 4 in category. So they're right on the edge. Ole Miss was in the first 4 out going into the weekend. So that game was obviously very important to them. So again, you're basically playing all tournament teams with the exception of, I guess, Mississippi State to wrap up the regular season as of right now. But big games, obviously. And again, A&M played very well at home this year for the most part. They've beaten Tennessee and Kentucky in their home gyms, but they're on a 4-game losing streak right now, so hopefully you're catching them at a good time. You can take advantage of that, and then, again, whatever happens against the likes of Florida and Tennessee, could split that, could lose both those, could win both those for all we know. But again, South Carolina getting back into the good graces with, that win on Saturday.
Yes, and so Tennessee will be a quad 1 game regardless. Like Chris, Florida, they're sitting at 31, which you're playing them in Columbia. So it's got to be top 30 to be quad 1. So that's right on the border. The irony there is South Carolina, if they lose to them, Florida probably becomes a quad 1.
Yep.
If South Carolina beats them, then, it's just a quad 2 win, which is kind of the same thing. So Ole Miss, that was a quad 1 game when it started. And then by the end of the game, it became a quad 2 game because Ole Miss was at 76. Instead, but whatever happened with other teams between then and now, Ole Miss has actually moved up a spot, and they're 75, so it's back to being a quad 1.
What's the ceiling for seeding for this team?
They were 7 last week.
They're 7 still in the official ones because Lenardi puts them out, and I just go by ESPN just for comparison purposes, but I saw on a graphic on ESPN, it was like sort of a live update that they had moved up to 6. So I expect them to be a 6 tomorrow with the official update.
If you can run the table the rest of the SEC slate, you could maybe get up to a 4, maybe.
What if you do that and win the SEC tournament?
That's a whole nother conversation.
Yeah.
We'll get into that as we get closer. Yeah. That'll do it for today's edition of the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour, presented by Firehouse Subs here on The Game.
All right, guys and girls, I know we all have those people in our lives that are just very difficult to buy for. I got a great idea for you. How about a custom framing job from our friends at Gold Line Framing? Maybe you got that man cave that you're looking to take to the next level. Maybe you've got posters or prints, diplomas, original artwork, canvases. I know some of you have jerseys that maybe you want to hang on the wall, or even flags. They can handle a custom framing job, whether you're a South Carolina fan or even a Clemson fan. They will reluctantly take care of you as well. They've been in business for over 20 years over at 511 12th Street, West Columbia. In store, if you need more ideas, check out the art gallery, home decor, furniture, and gift items. If you have questions or you need to set something up, give Gold Line Framing a call, 803-739-1337. They're open Tuesday to Friday, 10 a.m. to 5:30 p.m., and then on Saturdays, 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. Again, that's our friends at Gold Line Framing. Call them today, 803-739-1337.